Hey guys, seems like a long time since I've seen you guys, but regardless of that, I hope your summer break has been going well for you guys so far. Today I'd like to just share a little bit with you on the idea of keeping God number one in our life. And that can be something that we have to continue each and every day to make a priority because we can easily fall in that area. There's a verse in Psalms 119, chapter 119, verse 36 that says, "Turn my heart toward your statutes and not toward selfish gain." In other words, the writer there is saying and praying to God that God would help him to focus on the things of God and keep God number one in his life and not allow other things in life to get in the way of his relationship with God. And that's really, really important as we go through life. I have a chair here with me that's going to represent a throne, and you may have heard it already said that God sits on the throne or should sit on the throne of our heart. In other words, God should be that first priority in our life. I have several boxes here with me, and these boxes are going to represent things that can get in the way of our relationship with God and keeping God first in our life. And these things that get in the way aren't necessarily bad things in themselves or evil, but when they take that first priority, when they replace God in our life, that's when they become wrong. For example, it can be lots of things. I just have a few examples here for you. One could be social media. There you can see it. We're going to stick that in that box. And social media isn't necessarily all wrong in itself, but I know for myself, it's easy to spend a lot of time on it if I'm not careful, instead of focusing on God and spending time to do the things of God. So we'll put that there. Another one, and then once again, there's nothing wrong with this in itself, but our hobbies. And all of us have lots of different things we like to do. Some of us, maybe for you ladies, it might be going shopping. For us guys, it might be playing sports, maybe soccer, maybe playing on a soccer team. Maybe you spend a lot of time practicing for that. And it's, like I said, it's not wrong in itself. But when it takes the place of God in our life, that's when it becomes wrong. So we'll stick that in that box. And we'll put that there. And then a big one for a lot of people, and maybe this is something that you'll face later on as you grow older, and that is our money or possessions. It's easy for us as humans to be a little selfish or greedy sometimes, and if we're not careful, we become so focused on making sure we're making good money, that we have a job where we make a lot of money. Maybe we'll work long hours for us guys to try to make a little extra money. And if we're not careful, that greediness and that selfishness of trying to gain possessions can get in the way. And that can be a really big one. We'll put that in this big box, and we'll sit that on there. Well, remember I had said this chair here represents the throne in our heart where God should be. Well, if all of these things are in the way, or even just one of them, it squeezes God out of our life. We don't allow room anymore for Jesus to be there. But when we get rid of all those things and we allow God to be number one priority, then He can sit on that throne in our heart, and He can be with us through whatever we face. Now, I'd like to share with you a couple stories from the Bible about some people who did not keep God first priority in their life. The first one is in Matthew chapter 19, the story is from verse 16 to about verse 22, and it's a story about a rich young man who came to Jesus and asked him, "Master, what do I need to do to have eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Keep the commandments," or "keep my commandments." And the young man asked Jesus, "Which commandments am I supposed to keep?" And then Jesus listed off a number of different commandments, and I'll read them to you. Jesus said, "Thou shalt not murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness," or in other words, don't gossip or lie, honor your father and your mother, and love your neighbor as yourself. And this rich young ruler's response was, I've done all those things. That's what I do. I haven't disobeyed any of those commandments. And then Jesus asked him another question. And remember, Jesus knows everything about us. He knew that this young man, this rich young ruler, had lots of money and that it had a high priority in his life. And so Jesus said, well, if you want to have eternal life, one more thing that I'm going to ask of you is that you give up all your possessions, sell them, give the money to the poor, and come and follow me. And it says in verse 22 that when the young man heard that saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had a lot of money. And it's not, remember, money in itself isn't bad. Possessions aren't evil in themselves. But the reason God asked him, or Jesus asked him to give up those things, was because Jesus knew that the money that this man had was taking first priority in his life. And Jesus doesn't want them. Jesus wants to be number one in our life, and that's what's important to remember. Another story about a person who basically put money literally ahead of following Jesus was Judas. And Judas was the one, you may have heard of the story before or not, it's not important whether he did, but Judas was the one who betrayed Jesus when Jesus died on the cross. Judas went to the rulers of the town and told them that for a certain amount of money, he'll betray Jesus. He'll tell them where he is and he'll let them know everything about it if they give him a certain amount of money, and he agreed to it. But the sad part about it is Judas ended up betraying Jesus, and it didn't bring him any fulfillment. Putting money number one in his life didn't bring any fulfillment to Judas at all. It says it made it worse for him. He actually ended up killing himself because he committed suicide because of being so sorrowful for what he'd done. And so that story illustrates how empty it is to live a life for ourselves when we have things such as hobbies or money that we focus on so much. It doesn't bring any fulfillment. It's easy to think that those things will bring happiness, but they really do not bring any happiness in the end. One more story that I'll share with you is found in Luke chapter 12, verse 16 through 21. And this isn't a true story necessarily. It's just a story that Jesus told to illustrate a point. And it says that there was this certain man that went out and he planted all the crops in his field. And when the harvest came, it says that the harvest was very, very good. And this man became very wealthy, and he said, well, now that I've done all this good stuff, I'm going to build bigger barns. I'm going to tear down my old barns. I'll build bigger ones and store up all this, and then I'll sit back and I'll relax and I'll just take it easy. And it says in verse 20 that it says, but God said unto him, thou fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? In other words, that verse is saying that that's foolish to think that way, that we can gain all these material things and then sit back and take it easy. That's foolish to think that way, because in the end, once we pass away, once we die, all those possessions we have and things will mean absolutely nothing. And that's the point that Jesus wanted to bring out with that story. I have with me a bag of coins, and you can take a guess at how many coins are in there. I'll tell you in a little bit. But these coins represent, every coin represents 1 year of our life. There's 75 coins in here. And every year that passes by, one coin gets taken out of this bag. Now, that doesn't look like very many coins, does it? And in reality, our life is not very long. And that's why it's so important to keep God number one in our life. Our lives are short. And if we focus on all those different things we talked about earlier, then in the end, before we know it, we're going to come to the end of our life. All the coins, if you want to call it, years of our life are going to be gone. And then we're going to face eternity. And eternity is forever. It's not just for 75 years maybe on average for the average person's lifespan. It's the way more. We could stack a whole room full of coins and it wouldn't represent how long eternity is. Now, eternity is not something that we have to be scared about. if we keep God number one in our life, we can look forward to spending eternity with Him. God bless and hope you have a great week.